You know, I have to say I began this morning at 7:30 with Mary O'Donoghue, Andy Gilbert, and Andrew, and I feel like I've brought that to closure after 13 hours now. I feel like we've lived together throughout the day. First of all, I want to thank people for the warm welcome that I've received here. This has been a wonderful community to enter. I've been in a number of communities. This is my 23rd year as superintendent, but Andover is a very special place, and I want to just share with you some things this evening that I think will make you feel proud of the work that's done in schools. This is a great community with very talented, very dedicated, very committed teachers, and very creative teachers. This is a pattern I've followed in the past in other districts, but when I enter a community, I first of all do quick visits of all the schools so I can get a sense of the schools. But then I spend some time doing in-depth visits, and I spend 4 or 5 hours at a school and try to visit every single classroom, meet with the principal, talk about directions that the school is going in, and then meet with the entire faculty and discuss with them the kinds of concerns that they have, the kinds of interests, the kinds of things that they're proud of in the school. But what's really been fascinating is to actually enter the classrooms and get glimpses. And I know that, although I see some individuals who may be students in our schools, so they may get a much closer glimpse than the rest of us. But I wanted to share with you a couple of the glimpses that I've had, because I don't think we get grounded in the work that's going on, and the very creative work that's going on in schools. So let me take a moment at the beginning of this and just share some stories. So for example, when I was visiting Sanborn, I stopped into Lorraine Wu's kindergarten classroom. And in that classroom, I noticed there's a dinghy, actually, a boat, yes, a boat, that sits in the classroom. And she gathers her students into the boat, and it creates this both adventurous and comfortable environment. And they read together in the boat. They build a sense of community. They build a sense of closeness, and at the same time build a love of reading as they do that. And when I visited West Elementary, I visited a classroom, actually 2 classrooms, but they were combined, that Beth Miner and Jennifer Sands had combined their classrooms and were team teaching. And were team teaching in such a way that they could orchestrate which groups they wanted to work with and how they wanted to work. Sometimes they taught the whole group together. Sometimes they were able to support both the students who may be more gifted and the other students who may be more challenged. But they orchestrated a wonderful all-day-long exchange of students between these 2 classrooms. Or at South Elementary, Courtney Lowell, I stopped into her classroom. She's a 2nd grade teacher, and observed something that's called Open Circle, which is actually a social emotional learning program where students get to communicate with each other about issues that are going on in the classroom, or actually review some lessons about social skills. But when I did stop in, I watched a wonderful conversation about how to stop annoying behavior. Now, it was really interesting that students were talking about what was annoying, 2nd graders, and what was annoying, and what strategies that they could use to overcome annoying strategies. And as I listened, I was wondering whether they would do a presentation for all of us so that we could learn some of those strategies. Or stopping in again at Sanborn, I poked my head into Suzanne Crowley's classroom, and she has quite a reputation because she actually disappears for a moment out of the classroom and then reappears. But she reappears in full costume of what she's teaching. And so when I visited, she had reappeared as Explorer Eve, who was going to talk to the students about sea explorations in the 1500s and what motivated explorers to get in a ship and try to travel to the east by going west, and what sense that might have made. And it was just a wonderful lesson to watch, and a wonderful, the students were completely engaged, and she was completely in character. So if you said, hello, Miss Crowley, she would say, who's Miss Crowley? It was just a wonderful environment that she'd created. Or visiting Wood Hill and wandering through the halls, I noticed that there was a cave in one of the classrooms. It was interesting. The students had built a cave and actually were doing cave drawings, cave art. And I said, what is this? And this is a study, actually a way for students to get engaged in what it meant to be a cave dweller, you know, in our prehistory, so that we actually, and what those symbols might have meant and what it might have represented in the life that they were living And then walking further down the hall, seeing a team, a 7th grade team, that had literally had a Greek week, where they had brought all these features of Greek culture together, where they had studied philosophy, art, music in Greece, as well as just history, politics, the history of democracy. And at the end of that, pulled together a ancient Olympic ceremony where they really tried to recreate the Olympics. But this whole week, the entire week, was devoted to being Greek and living as you would in ancient Greece. Those kinds of experiences truly make a student feel that they are in the environment, and the learning is so much deeper and so much richer. I went on to West Middle School and saw 2 of our math teachers, Marge Andresen and Tiffany Goodwin, who were doing a very interesting way of approaching math. They were entering a unit on linear equations with 8th graders. And they had done a pre-assessment, and they'd noticed that different students came with different skills to enter this unit and understand the concepts. And so they had designed a variety of tasks that were sort of pre-linear equation kinds of concepts and understandings that students needed to gain, and organized students in groups. The students took on these tasks. They moved from group to group. The more advanced students actually took on more challenging problems, and in a way orchestrated a week long of activities so that all the students came together so that they're ready for the unit and ready to study linear equations. I also walked into Minda Reedy's high school engineering class, which was an extraordinarily impressive class, where students were learning the function of simple machines like levers, pulleys, inclined planes, wedges, screws, wheels, axles. But they were doing it by designing Rube Goldberg machines. Now, I don't know if you know what a Rube Goldberg machine is, but it's these absolutely complicated machines that do very simple things, like put a napkin on your lap at dinner. But you have to go through all of these machinations to get there. But they were actually understanding and enjoying their time in engineering and they had to use 5 machines, 5 simple machines, and understood the functions of those machines in a much deeper way by experiencing it. And then the last one I really want to talk about is Sandy Larone at West Middle School, where I walked into her classroom and I turned to the back of the room, and all these poems were in the back, and I started reading them. And I was literally completely engaged in reading poem after poem after poem. And these were not simple poems. These were some of the most impressive poems. I could not write a poem, and these were 8th graders who were writing these poems. And what I realized is that she had taken a model from George L. Lyons, and his poem was Where I'm From, and helped students model that thinking and look at the words that they were using so that they were richer, that the concept stood out, that you could feel their background in it. And I wanted to take a moment because we don't realize the incredible quality that our teachers offer our students, and the kinds of outcomes that produces. Oftentimes we sort of take some of that for granted, but when you read some of their work, some of the student work, it just stands out. So I'm going to take a moment, and I know we're supposed to talk about issues and other things, but I think it's important for us to really ground ourselves in the work and what's happening in classrooms. So this is a poem, Where I'm From Hannah Kim. If I wish she was here to share it, and I hope I do it at least some value in reading this. But she says, I'm from crayons, from markers and finger paints scattered across the floor. I'm from the yellowed sheets of music and the old ripped books that line my shelves. I'm from grass, from the smooth, rich dirt my mother so loves to touch. I'm from peonies, roses, and lilies, painted firmly, gently in the spring, planted firmly, gently in the spring. I'm from the floral shirts and fragrant creams, from the halmoni grandma leaves behind. I'm from the smooth wooden cane and fading memory that belongs to my great-grandmother. I am from Sarange, and I love you, and from hope for the best and brace for the worst, to keep always an eye on time. I'm from salty crabs dipped in sauce, spicy seasoned ribs, and the crunchy sweet peppers, hand-grown and picked. I'm from the dining room table where we've eaten our meals, shared 100 laughs, and shed many tears. I'm from my mother's humor, my father's curiosity, and in a drawer overflowing with pictures, with too many faces and moments to recall. I'm from the dark hair and almond eyes that spring out from the pictures most of all. I'm from the blooming spring flowers when my existence was announced, and from the crisp autumn air when I was born, a tight-tipped small bud clenched tightly like a fist, brought to these moments as time inched by, some captured by a flash of a camera and others missed. But as my own life blossoms and the leaves change colors, I will always remember where I'm from and where I'll always belong. Now think of the power. That's a 13-year-old. That's a 13-year-old. And poem after poem after poem reads like that. So what I wanted to share with you is just some of the stories of what I've seen and what we can be proud of. There are so many achievements. I could list all the statistics about our graduation rates and others, but frankly, it's in those kinds of experiences that we realize how wonderful the experience is of being in a classroom with children and how much we can offer our children. So let me now delve for a moment, at least, into the issues and initiatives we're facing. In terms of initiatives, I think one of the things we're very proud of is we won a grant. We're calling it the New England Arts for Literacy Grant. That's bringing our teachers together with our art teachers and our English teachers and elementary teachers to actually bring art into our work with literacy and to find ways that we can stimulate both creativity in their writing, creativity in their other work. We've expanded our project-based learning initiative. We have actually won a grant recently. I want to thank ACE, Andover Coalition for Education, for giving us a grant of about $33,000 to create innovation spaces in our schools where students can, whether they use 3D printers or other materials, literally create things and use that time to take, for teachers to come in and say, let's create something that relates to the curriculum and make this a much more alive and productive process. We've launched and are extending our Andover one-to-one technology initiative, and that is having some great success at our middle schools. And after some collaboration with Andrew, we hope we'll be able to extend this to our elementary schools and into the high school. And we're also working on new curriculum in writing, math, and science. And I have to say that some of the selections, I have nothing to do with this, I take no credit for it, but the selections that the teachers and administrators have made are really terrific selections of curricula that challenge students and enrich them in pretty extraordinary ways. I think we've chosen some of the best that's out there. And then finally, we're working on a new schedule at the high school. You'll hear much more about that as we move on. But it bodes to be an interesting evolution, and we hope that it will bring both advantages for teachers and for students by giving them opportunities for support, opportunities for personalization. We do face some issues. One of the issues is facilities. Some of our facilities need a great deal more care, and we have launched into a long-range facility process that will begin with an evaluation of our buildings. I think we can all be proud of High Plain, Wood Hill, Bancroft. Those are great buildings. Now how do we do something similar with West Elementary, work on Doherty, and work on the high school itself? Our enrollment is increasing. As you are well aware, there's much development in town. We're seeing the pressures of enrollment, and we will see more pressures in the future, which is will be requiring us to add staff. That many of the students who've come to us come from various cultures. I went to Sanborn one morning to meet our parents who had come from other countries that represent a wide variety, China, India, Pakistan, Turkey. It was fascinating to see the parents who were coming to us. And then lastly, we're working in special education because we want to be parents' first choice. We want Andover parents to look at us and say, this is the place we want to be, not only for regular education, but for special education, and that we have programs that are as good or better than any out-of-district placement that you could find. So with that, I'm excited to be here. I think we have a great school system. I hope I'll be able to add value to that and over time and the work that we do. It's exciting to work with the town of Andover and to the schools. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berman. I want to thank all the presenters tonight. This was, I think, a good cross-section, kind of an emphasis on business tonight, but a good cross-section. It's open for questions now. We have, our presenters are all here, so if anybody has a question, please raise your hand, and you can address the parking, downtown business, schools, town manager, anything you don't like. Anybody have any questions about parking? There we go, okay. Ted Tykert.
Yeah, I just have a question about, does the study consider actually who's parking in those spaces during the day? Is it shoppers, business owners, business people, meetings? Do we know who's parking in those spots?
We don't know where the person is going or who that person is that is parking the facilities. What we do know are the regulations. And so the permit spaces, we know that there are permit parkers that park there, but we don't necessarily know. What we do have information on is a survey that the town did last year that asks a variety of questions, and those survey results will be included in the report, which ask people those questions and talk about what their preferences are and where they park and where they don't park.
And does your report, that was just done during the week, those studies? Did it encompass any weekend activity at all? It did. Okay, thank you.
There are counts done both weekdays and weekends. I could have shown 400 slides, but tried to narrow it down, but all the information will be posted on the town's website for review.
I think they started with 88 slides, and we asked it to be consolidated a little bit. I want to acknowledge our police department that's here, Pat Keefe and his team, who have been very, very closely working with this whole group. And Lieutenant Guy as well.
Hi, I also just had a quick question about the parking. I didn't know if it was included at all within the scope of your study about bicycles, and in particular, whether it be accessibility to bike racks, increased availability of bike racks, or signage pointing you to bike racks. I actually biked to downtown recently, and I was all proud of myself for being green, and until I got downtown and I had to like traipse around for quite a while before I actually found a bike rack. And I wasn't even sure it was a bike rack, but I locked it there anyway. So it dawned on me we don't have that either, and I wondered if that would be addressed.
Great question about biking and bike racks. I did talk a lot about walking, but not necessarily about biking. The context of the parking study is really in the context of transportation and parking. So we will talk a little bit about bicycle parking, more about kind of creating that safe downtown environment for both walkers and cyclists. We don't have an inventory of where the bike parking is today, but can make some recommendations on where bike parking, smart locations of where it might want to go, as well as the safest kind of racks that would still work with your downtown environment. Thanks.
Another parking question. You mentioned something about enforcement by license plate. Can you explain how that works?
A question about enforcement by license plate. As anyone that has ever enforced parking will tell you, enforcement is a very labor-intensive and time-intensive process, almost a manual process in many communities. What license plate recognition does, it's usually a system that's a camera, similar to some of the new Easy Pass tolls, things like that, that capture the license plate and are able to track the GPS location in which cars are staying in which areas. The nice thing about it is it provides a bit of data. It takes some of the guesswork and some of the manual process out of it, and it might be a system that the town decides to go with. There's many different types of systems. Some of them are handheld, some are vehicle mounted. There's other options out there as well, but from the perspective of smart parking management, really thinking about enforcement being as efficient as possible, something that I would like to see the town move towards.
Hi, mentioning the Easy Pass stimulated an idea. I believe that somewhere in the distant future, not so distant, all cars are going to have Easy Pass type transponders. Can the payment for parking, the assessment of fees, be done on an automatic basis where each car is registered and you have an Easy Pass account that will assess one for parking?
Mm-hmm. There are systems that exist like that today. There are some airports, for example, that are using the actual Easy Pass. There's also a technology called an in-car meter, which more or less is something that will hang from your dashboard or your rear windshield, that is more or less a meter that you turn on inside of your car that counts the time for you and bills your account just like Easy Pass. I think the short story is that whatever technology the town decides to go with, and as we know, technology everywhere is changing all the time. It's really hard to keep pace with it, is thinking about something that's going to be easy to use, both from the user perspective and from the town's perspective in order to manage that technology. One piece of technology that I highly recommend and hope the town moves forward with, we'll include in our report, is paying by cell phone. And if anyone has used it in any other communities or the city of Boston, it's similar to an Easy Pass where you have your license plate linked to an account. Your account is automatically billed. And those days where it's raining and snowing and 20 degrees, which unfortunately are right around the corner, you can sit in your car and pay for parking. You don't have to walk up to the kiosk, or you can hop into the restaurant and pay for parking right where you're sitting. The pay-by-cell technology, there's no capital cost to it. It's a very smart, easy way to think about going as a first next step.
And I think the T-Lot now uses that application. I used it recently, and I could do it from the train as I was catching my train.
Good evening. I'm Steve Fink, and I have a fabulous daughter who lives in Somerville. And guess what? She sold her car, and she uses a little car that's parked on the side there, and loves it. And she's saving a lot of money. So that's interesting. The cool kids in Somerville seem to not want cars anymore. I'd be worried, Detroit. But the question here is there a public policy angle? Is that the sort of thing where you've seen communities actually drive to have Zipcar lots so that people don't feel they have to have as many cars, and literally reduce the number of cars that our community is using?
There's offering as many transportation options as palatable for community is a great thing. You have a great resource here with the commuter rail, and there are several communities that have been working with Zipcar or another type of car share service to have these shared cars, particularly located near transit stops. So if someone is coming to Andover but can't walk from the train station, they can take the car, hop in a Zipcar, and go wherever they want to get back to the train. Car share typically works well in environments that have a dense residential population. That's something that I don't know enough about here necessarily to go through those facts, but we can provide some information in the report about kind of where that tipping point is and at what point Zipcar or another car share service may be appropriate here. I think the punchline really of this presentation is, and kind of what we're finding in the downtown parking study so far, is that you technically have enough parking to satisfy your demand. You even have enough parking at all times of day within your public parking supply, but the demand is sometimes really high over here and really low over here. So how can we think smart first before thinking about building more? How can we think smart about kind of utilizing our supply a bit more efficiently before taking any other next steps?
I'm Ellen Keller. When this report is complete, just that little statement of yours that we have enough parking, it's just not necessarily utilized appropriately or needs to be jimmied somehow, that message needs to get communicated to not just existing businesses, but potential businesses. So I represent a landowner, and we're often trying to talk to new businesses of all kinds, retail, not resident, retail, commercial, whatever. And one of their concerns is there's not enough parking. And if the answer is that's actually not true, then I would hope that we would get tools out of this study, be they slides, I don't know what they would be, but some sort of a tool that I could use so I could show to a business, actually we do, and here's where it is. Will there be takeaways from this that we'll be able to use, that will be available to the businesses?
Our job for the parking study report, the final product, will be an action plan on here's what you should do first, here's what you should do next, here's what comes after that, here's who should do it, and about how much it's going to cost, and about how long it should take, and here's how this strategy kind of works with this strategy, because some of them really need to work together. Not just thinking about one strategy is not going to kind of solve the parking issues here. That report will be given to the town and the town manager, and it sounds like eventually the Board of Selectmen to take some next first steps. But we'll provide some best practices and resources and what we think would really work well here in terms of communications and resources.
And then it's up to us to figure out what to do with it.
We will provide a detailed action plan.
Fair enough.
I don't need that. I just wanted to ask, because I do need it. I just wanted to ask about, if you could speak a little bit about how, the connection between, a walkable community, parking, and then, how that affects local businesses in the community.
I grew up in Massachusetts. I understand that this is not Miami and that walking 12 months out of the year here is not the most pleasant thing. But in a downtown environment, to preserve the nice downtown environment that you have, none of us, or not all of us, are always going to be able to park in front of or next to every single place we want to go. It's just not going to happen. And if that was the case, that means you don't have enough customers here. So that's a good thing that not everybody can park directly in front of where they want to go. That's good. But what is not as good is some of the kind of walking challenges that you have sometimes when you park, say, on one side of the street and you want to cross and go to another side of the street. And I will contend that you want to improve that walking environment, because when I'm parking over there and walking over here, on that walk, I'm going to walk by several businesses. I might say, oh, I forgot, I did need to stop into CVS or pick up a bottle of wine or run that errand or whatever it might be. That creating that good downtown safe walking environment is going to be a good thing for businesses. There's a statistic that if somebody is walking along some nice ground floor retail, once they walk for about 15 or 20 seconds through like past a parking lot or kind of feels like the end of the downtown area, they're going to turn around and walk the other way. So really thinking about the walking environment, not just about kind of the pedestrian infrastructure, but what people's, kind of what the atmosphere is like when walking on a lot of the downtown streets. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, John. Following up on these last two comments, these last two speakers, part of the Historic Mill District project that Andrew made mention to earlier, this whole idea of walkable communities in other towns we'd studied. There's a part of me that loves what happened in Amesbury. The parking isn't anywhere near flatbread pizza, and nobody complains about it. Everybody is thrilled to be walking through the arch and by the public art and so on. And there are some new parking garages. You're probably familiar with Amesbury. They've built some new parking garages. They built a new park where the old town yard used to be. I shouldn't have said that, Paul. They moved to the old town yard. Can you imagine? what a concept. But that is a pretty exciting change in the community. And I go back to Newburyport. We always think we're parking here and we're going to spend the afternoon walking around Newburyport, and it's never something we wince about. So what are the tools, I like that cheat sheet that you were looking for. What's the cheat sheet we can give ourselves as a community to get the fact that, whoa, one of the things we want to change as we work toward Andover tomorrow is how do we make this a much more walkable environment where it becomes a destination?
Mm-hmm.
So that may be just too vague a question for an answer, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there's not one particular answer even. It's kind of a combination of things. There's sort of the physical infrastructure pieces of it, which are good sidewalks and good lighting and street trees and thinking about where you feel safe walking on the sidewalk and where you don't, including some of the crosswalks. Then I think it's the second piece is the building environment piece of it. There's communities that, for example, have bus shelters and awnings in front of their buildings. They have lighting and landscaping and other things that make you feel like you're kind of integrated and you want to be on that particular street or block. And then I think the other one is kind of the people factor, is the eyes on the street. It's the more people that are on the street, the better you feel, the next block you might actually walk. Part of that is both during the daytime and in the evening, particularly evening restaurant uses, and also downtown residential development, which a lot of communities are looking to get more people on the street, increase that residential demand that might support something like a car share or zip car. There's kind of a lot of those different components kind of need to work together.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Specifically, thank you to the presenters. A great job, well done, very concise. I hope everybody got a good overview of some of these important projects in town. I want to also acknowledge we have a few scouts here tonight that are getting part of their citizenship in the community merit badge. You're here getting some information. And you guys have any questions? Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks for Andover Cable TV for broadcasting this, and thanks for everyone for watching at home. Good night.